3319.11. This is routine for long-term substitute teachers.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Discussion. And this is a process, Mr. Toth, that we need to go through by law.
Correct.
For this, so.
Correct.
Non-renew does not mean that these.
Did
these
anything
substitutes
poorly?
will-
No.
Right, okay.
It's just it's to be compliant with the law. They filled a great need for us. Teachers were on leave, so that's what it is.
Other questions? Call the roll?
Mr. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 3, board approval to amend the administrative salary schedules for food service as presented. I gave you information in reductions of contract for our director of food service, Jen Hirsch. This is a shared service that we do with Ravenna City Schools. Because of new technology, our point of POS system, sales system, it's reduced the time needed to do paperwork and to comply with a lot of regulations, and has helped with inventories. So Ms. Hirsch can reduce some days. It's also a savings to the district. So number 3 is board approval to amend the administrative salary schedule for the food service as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Do you know if Ravenna has a point of sale service as well?
I believe they do, yes.
Call the roll?
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes. Motion carries.
Number 4 is board approval to enter into the shared service agreement with Ravenna City Schools for the food service positions as attached.
I'll move.
I'll second. Discussion? This has been entirely updated with the
It is, yes.
Call the roll?
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 5 is board approval of the following administrative contract effective for the 2014-15 school year. Bill Alexander, Bill Andexler for a 3-year contract.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion? Call the roll?
Mr. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 6, board approval of the following administrative contract effective for the 2014-15 school year. Jennifer Abujak Hirsch for 3 years.
I'll move.
Second. I'll second. Discussion? Call the roll?
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 7, board approval of the following administrative contract effective for the 2014-15 school year. Christopher Seifert for 3 years.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion? Call the roll?
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes. Motion carries.
Number 8, board approval of the following classified contract for 2 years. Michelle Street, secretary at the intermediate school.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion? Call the roll?
Mr. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 9, board approval of the following resignation. Monica Lazan, for a drama assistant for the spring.
I'll move.
I'll second. Discussion? She's already been serving this role for quite some time.
Correct, and then you'll see a motion later for that. So,
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 10, board approval to employ the following individuals for the 2013-14 school year pending appropriate certification and BCI and FBI approval.
I'll second. Discussion. Call the roll.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 11, board approval to employ the following individuals contingent upon attaining minimum participation criteria pending appropriate certification and BCI, FBI approval of supplemental personnel services for the 2013-14 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Jill, are these supplemental contracts essentially the same as they have been in the past?
Yes.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes. Motion carries.
Number 12, board approval to compensate the following resident educator mentors and to pay the stipend of 3% to them at the completion of their duties.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion. How long is the resident educator? How many years? Is it 3 years?
4 now.
4-year program.
Yes, 4-year program.
And that's state mandated, correct?
You are correct, yes.
State mandated. We do get reimbursement for year 1 for these individuals, but for year 2, 3, and 4, we do not.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes. Motion carries.
Number 13, and I apologize, I'm going to speak briefly to this. This is contract for our school resource officer, and I just want to make a brief comment that I've worked with Officer Urso in my short tenure here at Crestwood Schools, and I will tell you that he's a quality individual and does yeoman work at the school. So he's a great resource for myself and the administrative team here. So 13 is board approval to enter into an agreement with the Manaway Village to employ a Manaway Village police officer as a school resource officer in the Crestwood local schools for the 2014-15 school year.
So moved.
I'll
I'll
Go ahead.
second.
Discussion.
Do we know who will it be, Sergeant Russo?
If I have anything to do with it, yes. So, yes, I believe it will be. And I think if it wasn't, I think I'd probably have a revolt, but, so, yes. So, as long as it stays with us, yes. So.
When we approved this,
Mhm.
which was last year, I believe sometime, right? Was it start of the school year? I think it was. We had talked about some kind of evaluation process, just to get an idea of what the role is of the safety officer, the resource officer, and what are some goals that this individual could be evaluated on, just to know how its effectiveness. Has that taken place?
Hasn't yet, but it will. I mean, we've had multiple conversations. I will tell you that, to answer that question a little bit, but, I don't have an evaluation in place, and I'll work with Mr. Summers and Mr. McMahon on that process. But I will tell you that some of the tasks that, he's involved in, I don't know, on a daily basis, but we've used him for drug education for all of our high school students. He evaluates all our lockdown drills, all our securities, does parking lot duty, does anti-drug, meetings with kids, supports, any effort that the administrators want to do. And I know I'm missing something, and probably Mr. Summers and Mr. McMahon and Julie could probably speak to, a lot of different things. So as a team, we will evaluate the process, but he is an integral part of our team. So he also organizes our safety meetings, Does a lot of different things that I don't think they'll notice that would be tough. I don't know if you-
I think one of
Julie
the
or
most
some-
important thing is he
some-
just brings security to parents, knowing that he's in the building. I think that's, it's kind of rest easy because we have an officer in the building.
I just want to make sure that those things don't go unnoticed, and then somewhere down the line, we're asking the question, well, do we really need a school resource officer? And my guess is that list is gonna be longer than you mentioned, and we continue, and, you know, we want that documented.
And I can appreciate that, so we'll develop that.
Other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy? Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Sorg?
Yes, motion carries.
Number 14, board approval to employ the following individuals as spring sports game workers.
I'll move. Discussion.
What is the scoreboard for track?
That is middle school track. They use this for middle school track. 3 meets, I believe, a year. Is that accurate, Julie? Three meets where we charge admission and they run the scoreboard and do the ticket booth.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Sorg?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy? Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And I'm gonna have Mike Magdano to speak a little bit to this, the next item, number 15, board approval about tuition increase for our preschool program. Mike?
I believe that everybody received a copy of this in the board packet, and it pretty much explains the reasoning behind the increase for the preschool, regular ed, typical students, the tuition. It's been about $750 a year for those students, and doing some research on the revenue for preschool, as well as tuition of comparable preschools in the area, the increase to $1,100 seemed logical for Crestwood schools. One added piece to it is that with our preschool program, it is ran by certified teachers. We do have certified teachers, and we also follow the state curriculum for preschool students. So they're getting a very high quality education for a pretty good cost.
Mike, do you know how long that $750 rate has been in place?
Since day one, most likely
Since
day
day
one,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
We increased it like a year or so ago to take it up to $750, maybe $50, but we've tried to talk about it, tried to bring it up, but it hasn't been, brought up. And if you look at all the other area preschools and all the other school districts around us, $1,100, $1,1100 is still very inexpensive for what we are offering the students on a daily basis.
And then the added piece to that is there's a discount offered if the family would like to pay up front, or we will reduce $100 off the cost of that.
Ms. Rowe likes that.
And how many kids do we, on average, get into our preschool program?
We have 2, a morning and an afternoon. This year we added a part-time one mid-year because we had so many students. But for our typical students, 6 to 8 per session.
What's the long-term goal for this? Is this an area that Crestwood could grow or would want to grow?
It is an integrated preschool program that we have, so it's based on our students who are identified with disabilities, who we are required to provide the preschool program for. So the typical students, because it's integrated, we have to have typical students in the program. So basically, it's based on our number of special ed students that qualify for the preschool program.
But, yeah, and you always want to, the benefit that we talk about when we meet all the time is, we're keeping our own kids then. They're in our building, they're used to our system, they're with a certified teacher, which is just above and beyond. So they're ahead of the curve when they head for kindergarten. You know, we're not sending them out somewhere else to look at something else. They're with us, ready to go right from the beginning, so.
And if you look at our program as of right now, with students that just come in during the week and maybe to see a speech therapist, we're like up to 35 students, which is it seems to be growing each year. The word is really getting out there. But these are 35 students that are in our building. They're going to art, music, and gym, and they go to kindergarten. They go to kindergarten with a lot of confidence. They know what's going on. We know the child also, and it could be from the special needs kids to the typical kids, you know. But your typical peers are very important in that classroom also.
So can we get a couple hundred kids? No, I'm not being facetious, but for all of those reasons, we know that it's good for students' development. We know that we can give them a head start.
That would be classified as a different type.
Yeah, it's really
of
two different
preschool.
models.
Okay.
I'm through the state of, Ohio Department of Education, and I'm classified as a special ed preschool classroom, not a public school classroom, or early childhood classroom. I fall under special ed.
Which is why we have the ratio typicals with students with disabilities. I think the model you're thinking of, which makes absolutely perfect sense for what we're talking about, would be if we were just having the public school model that didn't involve students with disabilities, then it could be endless with the amount of kids we have. But because of the model we're under, it's that typical ratio for students with disabilities.
And what is the ratio, typical with special ed?
Right now, we have 6 typicals, 8 special needs kids. I'm only allowed to have 8 special needs kids. I'm allowed to have 6 to 8. The state truly wants you to go to 8. So for the past 2 years, we've been at 6. And I'm thinking this new director I'm under might want to push me to 8. Which, you know, that would be the ideal, is to have 8 and 8, because then you would have true typical interactions.
So you want somewhere close to 50-50
Right.
ratio? Okay.
So,
And the state would like to see that.
That's what the
Right.
state
Not
is
just-
pushing.
Not
The new
just the new
director.
director.
Yeah, sorry, no, the state is also pushing it, so.
Thanks for that clarification.
to understand the tuition increase, is it going to offset the increasing costs, like you say in here, to offset the expenditures of the preschool program, or do you have something in mind that you're going to be?
Well, right now, we provide the snacks, okay, so I've been doing it very well for $600 per year. Next year, that's gonna have to go up with the number of kids that are coming in and everything like that. And then, the morning class doesn't go to art, they go to music, and they might go to art more towards the end when they're a little bit older. So we have to provide, all the construction paper, all the paints, you know, all of those fun things, like we're doing butterflies, you know. We provide the caterpillars and, you know, and then everything like that, you know, so there's a lot that we provide that we do not ask the parents, you know. They don't send in art boxes, they don't pay any extra fees or anything like that.
And not only for the consumable piece, but we're also looking at academic, looking at some new curriculum options, and
Yeah.
we're also going to the Step Up to Quality next year, which is, you know, there are some areas that we need to beef up to meet the 5-star rating, which of course we're going for. So, it's also to offset some of those things, just, you know, to make improvements.
So your expenses have increased?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was all for it. I'm a proponent of mandatory preschool, so.
I get lots of calls from parents looking for a preschool at Crestwood, lots of calls.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, then I have to explain my program and how limited I am.
Sure.
You know.
I just have to convince the state for mandatory
Right.
preschool. So 15, board approval to increase preschool tuition of typical preschool students from $750 a year to $1,100 a year. Tuition reduction of $100, $1,000 a year if tuition is paid prior to the start of the school year.
I'll second. More discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Sorg?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy? Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Motion carries.
16, board approval of the 2014-15 high school, middle school, primary school, and intermediate school handbook as presented.
A lot of reading. I'll move. Discussion.
I noticed they're kind of together this time, however, it's still not the same. I mean, it is, but, you know, the covers are different. So, but I did notice they're better this year, so.
We actually met as a team, and they worked very hard on kind of melding things together to make it consistent throughout the district. So the administrative team did a good job with that.
So I thought that was okay.
As part of these, that includes athletic eligibility. And I have not investigated what other schools require for eligibility, but at Crestwood, our eligibility standards are a minimum of 1.0 GPA in middle school and 1.5 in high school for participation. And passing five courses, 5 credits. Is there a discussion about improving that standard?
Well, sorry.
You know, since I've been involved with the school board, we haven't had that discussion. I don't know. I'm sure those discussions are taking place. I look at those standards and I think, wow, that's really minimal. I don't know how many students that would impact if you were to raise that.
What's the state?
1.0, just take and pass the 5 classes. I think last semester I provided the board, and I could do it again, since we do have 2 new board members, basically schools in the area, especially our conference, what their standards were. I know Mr. Summers and I and Mr. Matthews did look kind of, not just kind of eyeballed it, how many kids that would eliminate from participation, because that's always a concern. You know, so I think that's something that has to be considered, how many students that would eliminate from the process, and you know, are there ways you can intervene to make sure kids can participate? You know, there's benefits to keeping kids eligible, because, you know, part of the reason is they come to school, they build bonds with coaches and with other players, and that keeps them engaged in the educational process. So I think those are some of the things you have to consider, but I think it's worth discussing, so.
But I'm under the understanding if you're not eligible, you are allowed to go to practice, correct?
You always can still practice.
It's just the games you're not allowed.
That is correct. That's typical throughout the state, yes, that is true. You can always practice team, because you could become potentially eligible. You're right, so. So, I mean, we certainly could put it on a discussion, at a future meeting. Okay.
Other discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Sword?
Yes?
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Number 17, board approval of a 3-day unpaid leave for Mary Ellen Griffin in September 2014 as attached.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion. I appreciate that she's letting us know well ahead in advance, so
She is.
that's nice. Let's call the roll.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes, motion carried.
18, a resolution of board approval of 2-day unpaid leave for Terry Stone as attached.
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion. Call the roll.
Mr. Sword?
Yes?
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes. Motion carried.
Number 19, and I'll open up with a little discussion on number 19. This is a resolution for Calamity Day makeup. Currently, as we stand, we are at 9 school days because of calamities, basically snow. It's been a great winter. Survived this winter.
Not over yet.
Not yet, but, Bottom line is, the state passed a law, you get 5 days that you don't have to make up, and then our legislature stated then that the next 4 days, you would have to make up. If you missed any other days, you don't have to make up those next 5. So for Crestwood local schools, we are at 9 days, which by law, we have to make up those 4. The state gave various options and plans. Typically, what we've done in this district, it's always been made up at the end of the school year. So that would put us into school June 6th, June 9th, June 10th, and June 11th in the school year. So that was one option. The other option was adding time at the end of the beginning of the school year, which obviously would affect transportation, affect arrival time for kids getting home, contractual issues potentially, and other things. And then obviously adding more days at the end of the school year in the summer, not necessarily educationally sound. So looking at all the options, the final option was that the state allowed districts to petition and put on a resolution if the board approves, where 3 of the days could be made up by what's known as blizzard bags. And blizzard bags, in a nutshell, are assignments that you could send home for a student. What assignments they would get during a typical day, and they can be enrichment, they can be review, typically not new material, but a student would get assignments at home. They would get 2 weeks to turn those assignments in, and that would be 1 day. Another 2 weeks, that would be 2 days. Another 2 weeks, that would be 3 days of makeup. That would allow us, those 3 blizzard bags, if approved by the board, would allow us just to make up 1 day, the 4th day on June 6th. The teacher's work day would be that Saturday, June 7th, or Monday coming back. The resolution I have in front of you today is asking your approval for those blizzard bags and an option. In discussion with the teachers, that was their feeling that was the best option for the kids and the best option for the district. I felt the same. So the resolution in front of you speaks to that. A little more information about blizzard bags. Students do have 2 weeks to complete the assignments for each day. So it's actually a total of 6 weeks. That would put, in speaking with the teachers, assignments have to be posted online, so they would be posted on our websites by Monday, April 14th. Students would need to complete all those assignments by Friday, May 23rd. Teachers can issue incomplete if students needed some accommodations or some time. So obviously we wouldn't end school to June 6th, so if there was some necessary accommodations, if allowable by the principal and the teacher, a student could receive an incomplete and make it up at a later date. If a student does not complete the assignments, it is an F. Also, attendance counts. So if a student does the assignments for 1 day, it counts just like they're in school. So they don't do any of the assignments. They're actually absent from school for those 2 days.
So
That's
it
what the
can
law
affect
speaks
their
to.
attendance as well as their grade.
Correct, yes, absolutely. So the resolution before you speaks to that. That's my recommendation in working with Wendy Benton, the president of the Crestwood Educational Association. It's also hers, so I think that's the best option at this time. Unfortunately, it's the best option we have for Crestwood schools, in my opinion.
I want to clarify
Sure.
something. I'm not
Absolutely.
sure exactly what you said.
Can you hold on to that for a minute, Todd? Let's read the resolution and get the motion first.
Sorry.
Sorry.
And then we'll get to that.
Number 19, board adoption of the resolution 2014-22 of the attached Calamity Day Alternative Makeup Plan.
Debbie's one, Bonnie's two.
All right, discussion.
Okay, there's 3 assignments. It has to be posted April 14th on the website.
Correct.
Is one assignment due in 2 weeks?
And
I'm not sure, you
No,
said 2 different
and
things.
maybe and I apologize, maybe I didn't explain it well. It's actually, it's not one assignment, it's an assignment for what the student would do for a typical day. So for,
Right,
let
right.
me, yeah, like a high school student would have a science for that one day, a social studies, maybe an arts.
Right, right.
So, yeah, so,
But
okay,
it's, that would be due 2 weeks from the 14th,
Yes.
correct, yes,
so they either get credit or they don't for that day,
yeah, unless.
in 2 weeks.
And, correct, unless the teacher gave some extension